Hello, in this video we're actually going to be working on an assignment. It's a very basic text adventure game, something in the style of an old adventure game book or a choose your own adventure book, the kind of thing that presents users with a choice and lets them select through things. This is an assignment in the Introduction to JavaScript Programming class as part of the Seattle University Web Development Certificate. So what you'll see right here is this is actually the repository for the assignment, which is on the SU WebDev GitHub account or on their site. You're going to actually go to the repository. It's named WATS3020 Text Adventure. And then you're going to want to fork it by clicking the fork button. And that's going to make a copy on your own personal account. So you can work on that and have that as your own work. Now in this case, I already have a fork here. So we're going to actually switch over. This is my fork of it. I just made it. And you'll see it has all the same files. It's even with the master that we copied or that we forked. And we'll see the README here kind of goes an overview of what this program or this page is going to be. So really, if you think about it, it's kind of like I already said, it's one of these old adventure game books where you're going to read some text and then be presented with choices, and depending on which you choose, it goes to a different area in the text or in the book. Of course, in this case, there's no book, it's all a page. It's a single page app where we're going to be dynamically changing the content on the page based on what, where in the story the user is. So you see there's a little overview, and then there's some requirements here where it talks about what it is we're actually going to be doing. In this case, a lot of the program is actually not written. There's just a little bit about some code for adding events, which we're not going to worry as much about that now. That's something in later parts of this program we'll discuss further. But we're going to be doing the rest of the work. This is just laying it out for us. The data, the actual structure of the story has already been provided, and we'll see that when we get into this. But really, we're going to be doing a lot of the work ourselves, so let's go ahead and get started with that. Now, as always, the first thing we do after we fork it is we want to clone the repository to our own system, our own computer. So we're going to go to our favorite terminal and make sure we're in the right spot here. In this case, this is where I put my projects. So we'll do git clone, and then we'll put that there and wait for git to go and do that clone. So we're in the folder. We'll see that those are all the files we expect to do. So then we'll open it up in our favorite text editor, or in this case, VS Code. Right. Now, if you have your own stuff that you use, feel free to use those. I'm using VS Code here. And we'll see that we have the index.html, but more importantly, we have the JavaScript file, which has got a lot of comments and a lot of stuff to do. So we're going to go ahead and get started on this. But before we do, I want to take a minute to talk about some of the structure of the program a little bit more carefully so we know what we're doing. So anyway, yeah, let's get started. One thing that's important to understand before we get started with the actual writing of the code is it's understanding the data that we're going to be working with. Now, you'll see here, I've gone to the section of the JavaScript file where the data is actually laid out. It's the variable is called story data, and it's an object. And it's got, you'll see it's a pretty big object here, but most of this is actually just kind of elements of the text adventure, right? The most important thing to understand is that this is an object that's got lots of little objects inside of it, and all of that is basically how we're storing this adventure in JavaScript. So you see that the first property that we have here is a string called title, and that is exactly what it sounds like. It's the title of the story. So it lets us be able to know what the story is called. And you can imagine that if we started making our own stories, that's how we would differentiate them. Now, other than title, every other part of this object is actually a very similarly structured object. They're all basically sub-objects, if you want. They're objects within objects. So if you'll see, for example, the very first one we see here is P1, and that's basically page 1. And you'll see that P1 and, for example, let's look at the next one, home end, they both have the same structure of having text and choices. Text being a bunch of text, and choices being an array with several objects that have each text and links. So wait, what does that mean? So really, when you think about it, this object here, P1, is the page of a book, right? There's the text on the page. You're a crow. You're flying high above the countryside. You see a farm off to the west and your home forest off to the east. That's the text of the page. Now, under that are the choices, right? And these are the choices that the player is allowed to choose. So you'll see here there's one choice is fly over the farm to the west, which then goes to another page called P2. And then there's another option, which is fly back home to your nest in the forest, which goes to a page called home end. So and those are stored in an array called choices. So if you think about it, choices is an array with two elements here. It's got element 1, or object 1, which is fly over the farm to the west, which links to P2, and so forth. So that is the structure, and you'll see that all of the other objects within our story data object look the same. So yeah, if you think about it, they're all just individual pages that are linked to each other. So the way we're going to be doing this is we're going to be displaying the text, and when the player chooses one of the options, for example, if they choose fly over the farm to the west, we're going to go get the P2 item, which is down here, and we're going to load that up, put that text on the screen, and then put these new choices up. So that is the structure of the data. And I wanted to go over that before we get started working with it, because a lot of what we're going to be doing is working with that data. So having a kind of a general idea of how it's structured may help a little bit. You also see if you go to the repository, there's actually a file that talks a little bit about this a little bit more, including the structure of that story data variable a little bit more. So now that we have that understanding, we can actually get to working on the code itself. So let's go ahead and get started with that. So to get started with this assignment, let's take a look at what the requirements are. There are these 5 requirements here. Now, I'm actually going to do them not in the order listed. I'm actually going to start with this one right here, add a function to update the text in the DOM, in the document object model. Reason why is because that's one that once we do it, we'll be able to actually see something happening. So it can kind of, and then as we complete the other things, we can kind of see how they're working. So let's go ahead over to our program here. So we see I have the main JavaScript file open here, and I also have the index.html. Now let's just take a look. What happens if we open index.html in our live server? We get kind of nothing, right? Nothing's going on. And if we look at the inspector, we'll see that there's an error, update page is not defined. So our program is trying to run the update page function, which is one that we're going to be writing. So once we write that, it will hopefully, if we look at our program here, we'll see at the very bottom, it actually will update the program to the first page of the story, to P1. So let's go ahead and see how that works. So we're working right here on these to-dos. And the reason I'm doing them both is because they're related. So this first one right here is create 2 variables, page content and choices UL. Use a DOM selector method to set the variable page content to the paragraph element with the ID of story text, and set the variable choices UL to the UL element with the ID choices. Now that's a lot of words. What is that saying? One thing you'll see a lot in this kind of environment, in JavaScript development, is this idea of if you're going to be referencing a certain element in the DOM with some regularity, is to actually just create a variable and store a reference to it, rather than constantly calling something to grab it. And that comes out of the idea that those functions and those methods that actually let you select it can be resource intensive, especially if you're running them a lot. So if we know we're going to keep changing this P element, which is the story text, and also the UL element, which is where we put the choices, why not just grab it all at once? So now it says query selector or get element by ID. So I have the MDN open to both of them already. So for those who don't remember, get element by ID, it's just, document.getElementById by ID, and then the ID, the text of the ID string. So we'll see in our index, we'll even see that here's this paragraph here. ID is story-text. So that's the one that's going to keep changing dynamically as we go. So let's just create that. So we'll say let page content equal document.getElement by ID story-text. So we're good with that. Now, oops, of course you have to learn to spell. Get element by ID. So that's that. Now let's see how it would be done with query selector. So query selector we'll see is it's a more powerful tool because it can get anything depending on what you pass to it. But we want something by ID. So we just take a quick look at the example. We can see that it's really just a matter of saying query selector and then use the pound or hashtag with the ID that we want. So let's go ahead and write that one. We'll say let choices ul equal document.query selector, and then we'll do hashtag, and then it's the one we want is choices. So it's choices. So if we go and look, we'll see that that's actually this UL here, where we're going to be replacing these two list items with all the different choices that are available. Okay, cool. So we got that done. Now we need a function called update page. So function update page that accepts a page parameter and handles displaying the page in 3 steps. Now I'm going to call it new page just because I just want it to be clear what we're working with. You can call it whatever you want, just make sure you're referencing it properly. So it should set the text of the page content equal to page.text. Okay, so we're going to say page content dot. I'm going to use inner HTML because really I just want to replace it with this text, and also because if you look at the actual Java, the data that we're working with, you'll see occasionally there's actually HTML in there to provide spacing. So we want that to show up as HTML and not as BR. So we're going to just make the, so what this is going to do is just say that paragraph that we looked at in index.html, everything inside of it is just going to get replaced with that block of text. So cool. So we'll say that's going to be new page.text. Okay. So that one's done. Now, for each item in the array page.choices, it should create a new list item element with the text of page.choices I.text. In addition, the new li element should have an attribute called data slug. So, okay. So we're going to go through this thing. So we're going to need a loop. So we're going to say for choice of new page.choices. So there's a lot of different ways you could have done this loop. I'm going to choose to go with the for of loop because I think that kind of gives us the effect we want. So we're going to say we need a new list item. So we're going to say let new list item equal document.createElement. All right. And for those that don't remember how that works, we do have the create element here, where basically we just give it the tag name of the element, and if it doesn't know that, it's going to create an HTML unknown element. So make sure you spell this right. So if you accidentally put something that isn't correct, it'll make an unknown element, which sounds spookier than it probably is. But so we created a new element. Now what do we want? We want the text inside, the HTML inside, to be equal to the text of this choice, right? So we're going to say new li.inner HTML equals choice.text. Okay, and now the weird part is this part here about data slug. So we need to have an attribute called data slug set to choices to the link value. Now, that is something that's being used by the part of this program that's pre-written, the part that actually creates the event handling for clicking on the option. So don't worry about that. You just do have to make sure that you add that attribute data slug. So how do we do that? Well, we're going to say new li.set attribute. We're going to say data slug, and it's going to be choice.link. And then, so we're done making that new list item, but right now it's still floating in the ether of our program. We need to actually put it on the page, and that's where we're going to use that the choices ul.append child new li. Right, and that's going to throw it onto the list as the last child. So then this last thing is at the end of the function, call the function add event listeners. Now that is a a function that you can actually, it's already part of the program. You can actually see it down here. Add event listener. Add event listeners, sorry, here we go. Probably not the best name because it's very close to a reserved, that method name, but whatever. And this is actually the thing that makes those buttons work. So at that point, we've done our update page. So let's actually take a look at our live server, what it looks like. Okay, so we'll reload that. And it doesn't look like anything. Oh, okay, so document.getElementById is not a function. There we go. That's weird. Okay, so now we have this page. It's sort of displaying properly, but you may already notice there's a problem. So we have the title is correct. We have the page text is correct. The choices, though, we have first choice and second choice. Like, what are those? Well, as it ends up, those are actually what defaulted in that the unordered list. So if we were to keep going, the problem we would observe is that every time we go to a new page, you would just add the options to the bottom, but all the existing options would still remain. So we don't really want that. So what we have to do is actually go and clear it out. So now what we're going to do is we're going to say choices ul.inner HTML equals, that's going to clear out the interior of that unordered list. And now you'll see that the options look correct. So we've done the update page function, and it looks like it's working. So are we done? Well, no, of course not, because now if we click that option, we'll see, uh-oh, it's trying to call this function called change page, and change page is not working. So that's what we're going to move on to next. Okay, so now that we've done the update page function, we could go and look in the order of their being presented in the requirements, but let's actually look back to what happened when we tried to click on something, right? So we click fly over the farm to the west. It says, uncaught reference error, change page is not defined. So let's actually go ahead and take a look at that function, right? Let's see, add a function that advances to the next page. Okay, so we need the function change page. So create a function called change page that accepts a parameter called slug, and which handles turning the page in 3 steps. It should call the record choice. It should call the record choice function and give it the slug as a parameter. It should set the current page value by calling the getCurrentPage function and give it the slug as a parameter. And it should invoke the update page function and give it the current page object as a parameter. Okay, that makes sense. So we want a function called change page, and we'll have I'll just call it slug like they say. So slug, which handles turning the page. Okay, so first it should call a record choice function. So record choice slug. It should set the current page value by calling the getCurrentPage function. So we'll say let current page equal getCurrentPage slug. And it should invoke update page function and give it the current page object as a parameter. Okay, so we'll say update page current page. So that should be it. Now, of course, this isn't going to work quite how we wanted because, as it ends up, getCurrentPage and record choice don't actually exist yet. But let's see what happens when we go to our page. So here we go. So we're going to say fly over the farm to the west. Now it says record choice is not defined. Okay. So while we're here, let's just take a look at record choice. That will accept a slug parameter and add it to the choice list array, probably using push. So this is actually one where what it's doing is recording the choice, but how we're storing that in this program is we have an array, choice list, which starts with P1. This is basically just a list in order of pages that the player has been to. So we could say function record choice slug, and we're going to say accept a slug and add it to the choice list array. Okay, and we want to add it to the end because this is in order. So we're going to say choice list.push slug. So now we have that. And just to make sure it works, we'll say console.log choice list. So let's see. So we still have, now we have get current page is not defined, but we'll see that when we did that, it outputted the array. It was P1 and then P2. So if we start over, we do that. Now we say P1 and then home end. So that's working. So I'll remove this. So record choice is done. Now we need get current page. So this is a function called get current page. It should accept one parameter, which is the slug for the current page. This function will fetch the current page and return a page object using the slug value for a key. So this is just saying that we have that big story data variable, and we need to get the next one, right? Knowing that they're going to this slug. So we're going to say function get current page slug. Okay. Now we're going to say, we'll say let new page equals. Okay. So we're going to say it's story data, and now we're going to say slug. Right? Because if we look back to our story data, let's say we send it to slug P1, it's going to send back this, which is what we want, right? That's a page. So we're going to say, okay. And then we just need to return, right? So it's not enough to say we found the new thing. We have to actually return it, right? Because someone's going to be is waiting for this data. And that someone, of course, is us back here where we said let current page equals get current page slug. So now let's see what happens. Oh, so it went to the second page. So it's actually, the basic program is working now. We can navigate around and then see the little story and do all sorts of stuff. So you can play through it at your leisure. But that is now the text adventure program in its basic form is now done. So at that point now, like we always like to do, we make sure everything is saved, and then we'll do a git add, and then we'll say finished base game, and then we'll git push. Now, of course, we're not done yet. There's still more to the program, and let's see where that is, right? The things we still have done, I mean, we could look to see that it has something to do with undo choice, right? We recorded a choice, and we don't really know what we're doing with that yet. I mean, we do because we've looked at we know the basic framework of the program, but we can think about it. We don't really know what this is doing. It's just adding to an array. And actually, if we look at our program, we'll see we have this undo button that doesn't actually do much of anything. It actually says undo choice is not defined. So that's what we need to do. We need to finish up this stuff, and we'll do that here in a bit. Okay, so here we are. We're actually almost done. We've done a big part of this program. We actually have a working text adventure that proceeds through a story and lets us have all the fun that we wanted from this game. However, we're not quite done because there's still some stuff that wasn't working. And if we look over the requirements, we'll see we're missing something. So let's go over it. So in order to complete this assignment, we need to do the following things. Add a function to get the current page. We did that. Add a function that records a user's choice. We've done that. Add a function to update the text in the DOM. We've done that. And add a function that advances to the next page. We've done that. You'll see that number 3, add a function that will undo the last choice. That's the only one that we actually still have yet to do. And if we go back to our actual program, we'll see that it works pretty well. We can eat some cheese. We can do whatever. That's part of the story. That's not me being strange. So we can do that. And actually, if we look, we can even see that array where we've been recording the choices has all our choices in it. So we're making good progress. We just need to be able to make the undo button work. Because right now it says, uh-oh, undo choice is not defined. So let's take a look at undo choice. So here we go. Create a function called undo choice that will remove the last slug in the choice list array. And then we'll return the last slug in it. So basically what we're saying is we have this array, right? Like we have it right here. Let's see if we can make this any bigger. Right? We have P1, 2, 3, 4, 5, share cheese, P1. So we're saying undo, we want to kick P1 off of this and put us back at share cheese. That step in the array. Okay, so we need to take the last element off of an array. It ends up, as we may have learned previously, or you may have learned previously, we actually have a method for that, pop. right? We pop the last thing off of the array. So what we're going to do, we're going to say function undo choice. So we're not passing it anything because it doesn't, we just need to change stuff. And the choice list is actually declared up here. It's available to the function. We don't need to worry about passing it to the function. So we're going to say choice list dot pop. Now, if we wanted to, we could assign the return value to a variable, and that would actually let us have that last value as it pops off. But we don't care. It's done. We're done. We've popped it off. Now we need to get the last thing that's in the array. So we're going to say let let page, I suppose, or slug. It's a slug equal. We want. Let's see. How do we can refer to the array. But of course, we don't know which one the last element is, but we know we can figure out how long the array is. But then we always have to remember that arrays start at 0, so we subtract 1. So this is we're saying we're going to get the element in the array that is the length of the array minus 1. So that's the last element in the array, and then we're going to return that slug, which then we'll take a look down here, and I'm assuming it's over undo, right? Let slug equal undo choice. So it's going to handle the rest of it for us. So let's go take a look how that works. So we reload our program. We're going to go for the cheese. Oh, we didn't like that. Let's undo it. Oh, we've undone. We're back at the previous page. So our undo function works. So we've actually now finished all the requirements of the assignment. If we look here at the basic requirements, right? We added a function to get to the current page. We added a function that records a user's choice, a function that will undo the last choice, a function to update the text, and something that advances us to the next page. So these are all the basic requirements. Now, because this assignment is one where hopefully you can look at it and think, have a lot of exciting thoughts about reading game books as a child, at least I did. There's actually a number of different stretch goals here that you can kind of try out with. For example, you could write your own story. You could make some changes, add some image data if you wanted to. So there's some things like that you can try. Feel free to take a look at those. Also, just feel free to explore on your own. This is the first assignment that we've worked on that to a certain extent feels like this could be something you would show to your friends and say, hey, look at this. Or show to your family or your coworkers. Because really, although you could polish it up, it does feel like something complete. I mean, like I said, there are countless books that have been written that are very similar to this. So there we go. So we've finished it though, and I'm going to go ahead and commit my changes, finished assignment, and then push it. And now we're done. So, like I said, you should take a look at those stretch goals and hopefully try a few of those out on your own. See where you can take this assignment, because this is a good opportunity for you to explore, to try new things, and just to be crazy.